Hello, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Emily LaRusso and I'm a graduate student at Nova Southeastern University and a teacher here in Orange County Public Schools. I'm going to be doing a presentation today on the Florida Standards Assessment. This is the new test that's going to replace the FCAT 2.0 that we've seen previous in schools, elementary through high school. The test that you're going to see later in the presentation is very different from what we saw previously on the FCAT. The reason for this new test is because Florida is moving to the Common Core state standards. These are a set of standards that are held by all the states. That way, if your child leaves their school in one state and goes to another, the standards will be the same and their education will be the same. The purpose of this is to make sure all of our students across the United States are getting an equal education. Okay, why is FCAT being replaced? And I talked a little bit about this already. With the new, more rigorous standards that we have in place to help our students here in Florida succeed, the FCAT 2.0 is no longer a valid test. It doesn't serve the purpose of testing these more rigorous standards that your kids are going to see in the classroom. The new Common Core state standards, they give students more of an opportunity to learn and be successful in college, career, and life skills. This new method of assessment is going to allow teachers to emphasize on critical thinking skills for your students. It will provide our students with even greater opportunities to live and learn in Florida. The difference between the old standards and the new standards is really getting your children to think critically and to dive deep into what they're learning. What changes will Florida students and teachers see? The new standards are going to prepare our students for success in college, career, and in life by emphasizing on analytical thinking. No longer that multiple choice, pick the right answer straight from the text. It's really diving in and getting a better understanding of what they're learning and being able to interact with it. The new test is going to provide more authentic assessment of the standards because it will include more than just multiple choice. And I'm going to show you some examples of what that will look like later. Students are going to be asked to create graphs, interact with test content, and write and respond in different ways than on a traditional standardized test that we're used to. New question types will assess students' higher order thinking skills in keeping with the high expectations of the new Florida standards, which are a variation of the Common Core state standards. Student requirements. Everybody's thinking student requirements. Well, what does my kid need to be promoted? What happens to keep them to be retained like we had with FCAT 2.0? Well, the guidelines for promotion and graduation remain about the same. Students entering third grade in the 2014-15 school year will be required to achieve a certain score on that third grade ELA assessment, which is the English Language Arts component, in order to meet promotion requirements. The score has not been determined yet and will be determined in the spring, and it will ensure that students are appropriately identified for either retention or promotion in the same grade levels. Students not meeting the criteria, just like with FCAT 2.0, will have some other requirements that they can make 1 out of 6 that is a good cause exemption where they could still be moved to the next grade. For FCAT 2.0, I know students have a chance to go to summer reading camp if they're in third grade. If they score well in the Iowa state test, they get good cause up. Same kind of requirements will still be put in place for children. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the examples of how this test is different. This is an example of one of the math questions students will see. It's pretty basic, straightforward, what we're used to seeing on a test. What is 78 rounded to the nearest 10? And it gives us some multiple choice options. Some things that are different. It's not paper pencil. If you look, it's all in a computer program where the kids will be able to zoom in and out. They'll also press the next button to move from one question to the next one. At the end, it'll tell them it's an end of test, but they'll also have options to go back and recheck their work. So that's something that's definitely different for students to see. Let's take a look at another one. Okay, here are 2 other different types of questions that your kids are going to be seeing. This is where you're going to see the changes that are being made. For example, in this question here, They're asked to use the connect line, which are these tools up here, to create a rectangle with an area of 24 square units. This gives children a wider range to create different possible answers to a problem. It's not just find the area of a rectangle anymore. They actually have to put the dots, connect the lines, and make a rectangle that has an area of 24. And they can do that in different ways if there are multiple strategies, using the area equals base times height to represent the 24 square units. So this gives them a little bit more leeway to have there's multiple answers that could be correct. Of course, then they would move to the next. This one also is a little bit different than what kids are used to. They'll actually get to, there's a longer explanation, and it's a couple step problem. Students are going to be asked for this one to, James has 12 star stickers. He wants to divide them equally into 4 groups. Instead of just coming up with the answer, they have to use the tool up here to actually drag and drop the stars to divide them, which I've already done for you for this example, into the boxes to display it. But then also, they have to use the numbers here and drag and drop to come up with the equation that is shown for the problem. So it's 2 steps, but it also gives students a more kinesthetic ability on the test to be able to move actual objects, which will help diverse learners. Here are some other examples of what students are going to see on math. For this example here, they have to use the shape here, where they have to shade an area greater than 1/2 but less than 1 whole. So they actually would touch the tiles, which I did to put the colors to represent it, and then they'd actually have to drag and drop the numbers to represent the fraction shown. Once again, going a step further than just choosing B for 3/5. Here, they're really going to have to solve a problem and then think about it again, which is kind of neat. For this one, the equation asks for D divided by 3 equals 12, remainder 2. They ask for what the dividend is for the problem. So they have to come up with the first answer here. Down here, there's a keypad where they can plug in their answer. The next question that they're asked is, okay, let's take it another step. Well, what would the dividend be if there was no remainder? So they have to now think again and say, okay, if there was a remainder, no longer a remainder, what would that dividend be? So it's kind of a 2-step problem, really getting them thinking in different ways. This is an example of the reading questions that your students are going to see. On this side, you're going to see the story, where they'll actually be able to scroll up and read the whole passage. The differences are the question types. This example is more similar to what they've seen before, where it's more of a multiple choice, where they have to pick 2 sentences that the author would agree with. So they have to read the passage, think about what the author is trying to say or the message, and then pick 2 sentences that the author would agree with, and they just simply click and press in those boxes. This is where it starts getting a little bit different. For this example, same passage, different question. In a traditional FCAT 2.0, they would ask the student, what is the main idea of the story? And they would have A, B, C, D choices for them to choose from. Here, they no longer are given that option. What they'll have to do is read the story, come up with the main idea, and will actually have to type in the space provided to give an answer. So they'll actually have to come up with their own ideas of the main idea, and then be able to represent that using sentences where they're actually writing it out versus giving a list of options to choose from. Here, same story again, but this time it's more of a picture, drag, drop kind of a question, where the students would have to take what they learned in the text and then move and drag, drop to answer a question. So for this, it said place tools used for online learning in the box. So they would have to choose from the pictures and drag and drop the ones that would have been used for online learning, which would have been discussed in the text. So that's something a little bit different. Reading continued. Okay, again, here, same story. This time they're given a a paragraph, and they're actually going to have to go into the paragraph and find 2 sentences that are going to tell how online classrooms and regular classrooms are alike. So they'll have to actually go in, read, and then they click the sentence, which will turn green, and they'll have to make 2 green that actually answer the question. This is definitely a new area for the reading component. It's the grammar. It's using grammar, but in a different way. I've already clicked some of the boxes open so you can kind of take a look at what they'll see. They'd be given a passage. What they'll have to do is they would have about 5 words that are going to be in this green color here. Students would have to say, okay, there are 5 words in green. They have to decide which ones are incorrect and make that appropriate change. So for example, I've already done this one here. It had originally said they looked a little bit like small bears. They look a little bit like small bears was changed, and then it'll cross it out. Okay? Down here's the one that I have open, hours. Okay? It should be hours. So it's blue, I clicked it. This is what would come up for the students as options. They'd have to go through each one, of course, pick hours, click it. It'll ask for them to say, okay, and then again it would do this. It would cross out this word and then put in the new one. They would leave alone any ones that were correct and of course fix the ones that are incorrect. So that's a new piece put in there. Lastly, we have the writing component. Writing traditionally for FCAT 2.0 was students were given a prompt. It was either narrative, where they had to write a story about something, or an expository, where they had to explain something. This is no longer the case. What they're going to do is get a piece of text now, story again, where they'd have to read a passage. And then they're going to get a question that relates to the story, and they have to write in response. So for this story, they asked students, the readings talked about clutter and being tidy. Write an essay in which you give your opinion. Is clutter sometimes okay, or should you always try to be neat? Use information from the passages in your essay. So for this, they have to come up with their own opinion, but be able to back up their opinion using the text. They're expected to pull pieces from the text and ideas from the text to support their opinion. It asks for them to write an introduction, be able to support your opinion using information from the passages, and also to write a conclusion that is related to your opinion. So it will still be, and they would actually be typing it down in this box here. It would still be that multi-paragraph essay, the 5 paragraphs that students traditionally have written, but now they'll be forming opinions and ideas based on text, and also have to be able to support their ideas and opinions based on text, which is something students had traditionally not done. This is the website that parents, like you guys, are going to be wanting to take a look at. The FSA is Florida Standards Assessment. This is the website that you're going to want to take a look at. You can actually go to the teachers section to look at some stuff, but there's a parents section. The parent section is going to be huge. You can take practice tests, just like ones I've shown you. Your students can get on, or your children can get on and take practice tests, just to get an idea of what that test is going to look like. Of course, during the school year, your children will be exposed to these types of questions, to the standards, to these higher order thinking, creating, drawing, graphing types of problems, writing in response to reading. But these are things that you might want to take a look at home with your children so that they're best prepared for this assessment coming at the end of next year. That's it. Are there any questions? Yes?
During the writing portion, will my kid be able to access spell check and everything else that's in the computer, or is he limited to actually answering the question?
Okay, that's a great question. Honestly, I don't know. It's a new thing, but I'm going to say probably not. The old writing for FCAT 2.0, when they were writing, spelling is a component, but they didn't take off points for misspelled words that were larger words. If it was simple words like the, those, there, we, those words you would have gotten scored down on. I would have been taken off your score. but larger vocabulary, even misspelled, would have been overlooked as long as the grader could understand what they were trying to say. So I'm assuming they'll keep the same rules, but I'm not sure. But no, I did not see a spell check feature at all. That's a good question. Yes?
So are tests just in the regular school year gonna be on computers and more generalized like this? Are they still gonna have to do tests that are multiple choice on this, like during the regular school year?
Great question. Our assessments are going to be changing. I know as part of the new curriculums that we've had, there is a computer-based piece. There's a computer test, so the kids can actually get on and take their normal math test or their normal reading test on the computer. Are the questions necessarily at this level? No. I'm gonna be honest, they're not. But I know that even through my school and the system that we're going to have to make those changes. We're gonna have to find things for the students to be working with on a daily, because yes, we can't expect them to do it this way and he gets the test and it's completely different. I also don't believe that everyone, all grades this year, are gonna be doing a computerized test. I'm not quite sure how they're going to do that yet, but from what I've been told so far, I'm not sure if it's all gonna be computer-based, just simply for the fact that all schools are not gonna have that much, we don't have that capability as of yet. We are moving that direction. In the county, we have a couple pilot schools that are already working completely digital. Every child, everybody has either an iPad, a laptop, and they're working in a digital curriculum. There's no textbook, it's all online. So we're moving that direction, but we are not there yet. So we'll have to see as this year unfolds. Great question. Yes?
You answered part of that for my question, they obviously have to be expected to utilize the computer that well and that good, so I assume that throughout the year, that's something that they would be taught as well.
And
Not
that's
just hand them an iPad and be like, do this.
right. First and foremost, lots of our children, they're already familiar with these type of digital. Not everybody. You have different schools from different socioeconomic environments, and not everybody. Of course, we have to teach them, A, how to use the technology. But another thing is, even as an adult going through this, it was tricky. Being able to know how to do the dots, connect the lines, do all those things. It was very difficult. That's why, first and foremost, parents, if you can get your kids on this to play with it, even, it's just a test, but just to have them manipulate it, get to know it, that's gonna help immensely. But of course, the schools are gonna have to step up and really expose our students to this. There's no way we're gonna let them blindly go in, because yes, the computer program is not as user-friendly. I didn't find it user-friendly. So as a teacher going back to the classroom this year, my students are gonna interact with this in a whole different way. And I know that we've all been sent this in the county to be able to interact with it, and I know we're gonna be working with to make sure our students are prepared. But that's a great question. I had the same thought when looking at it. Anything else? Yes?
You said you're switching to this FAFSA
Mhm.
over the FCAT. Is everybody on FAFSA, all states, or is this just a certain number of states? So if I move anywhere in the country, are they all going to be on this, or is this just 10 states that are doing this and we're just jumping in?
Okay. As far as the Common Core state standards that I talked about at the beginning,
Yeah.
that's the majority of states now are all in a Common Core state standard. Florida, has adapted them a bit. They're pretty much on point with all the other states as far as the Common Core. We may have added or deleted one or two things. I'm gonna tell you that's true. But it's still Common Core state standards. We're just calling them the new Florida standards. So it's the same thing. So your child going to school here, it should be very similar, if not identical to the standards if they move to another state. Majority of the states are doing Common Core. I think there are very few, I'm not sure how many offhand, but it's maybe a handful that are not moving this direction. It's a big initiative for the United States. So yes, it would be, they'd be able to transition perfectly. Their test would not be called FSA, because that's the Florida Standards Assessment. They may use something called PARC. The PARC exam is a huge exam, very similar. However, it was made by a company. We hired in Florida our own nonprofit company to make the Florida Standards Assessment instead of using PARC, because the cost of PARC was too high. It was too expensive to use. So you may see a different standardized test.
So does every state get to choose exactly how much they want to follow the guided test lines?
As far as testing or standards?
the standards. So like if it's how much of it they wanna take from what everybody else is doing.
Right, I mean, it's ultimately still a state decision, what the standards are. Of course, it's not one person's decision, it would be a group. So yes, you can make adjustments and tweak, but I think for the most part, most states are sticking with the Common Core state standards. If you go online and you Google Common Core state standards and you compare them to the Florida state standards that come out, they're identical. There may just be something that's added, extra, one or two things here or there, but for the most part, they align very well. So, but yes, every state can make their own adjustment for their state. That's a great question. Yeah.
I love the presentation, it was fantastic. There were two things that you said that kind of got me thinking about something. In the beginning, you talked about how the point of this is to move towards giving kids an opportunity for equal education
Yes.
throughout the nation. And then there's also the issue of technology, and you said like even for you as an adult, it was hard to go in and manipulate these things, and if you have the ability to introduce your kids to this, do you think then that there's a chance this is setting up a different unequal playing field in terms of kids that don't have access to computers other than at school, or different like schools that are, you know, have more money being able to give kids a better background for this?
You know, and it's interesting you bring that up, because that's always been a thought in my mind as a teacher.
I figured, just knowing your background in the schools that you teach at.
Right. I've always thought the same thing about it. Is it an equal playing field? And there are different views on that that they have out there. I think that the county and the states are really trying to work to make that more equal in those schools that are really struggling, where, you know, a student may not have a computer at home. Well, how is that fair? You know, with this whole digital classroom, which is really the push that everybody's going to, where everything's going to be completely digital. You know, having students being able to have those laptops to take them home with them. You know what I mean? But then you have internet. Do they have internet access? Do they not? And that's something that districts, the states, the country is really going to have to look at, because that's been my question. We're moving very digital, but everybody's not digital.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see as an unintended consequence how all this is playing out.
And I agree. And then you have those people that say, well, they have something. They have an iPad. They have something. And for the most part, most children, most parents, they do. But that's not everybody.
Yeah.
And like I said, yes, you have a kid from very, you know, wonderful neighborhood who's got the iPad, the smart TV, and, you know, the computer in the room. And then you have the kid that maybe have one iPad per family, or nothing, or no Wi-Fi at all. So yes, that's something we're still going to have to struggle with, and that's been a question that I've had as well as an educator. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the districts really tackle that issue. I don't really have the quite answer yet for that, but yes, I'm on board.
I was just interested to hear what you had to say about that particularly.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know quite how that's going to work or how fair that is.
Yeah, we'll see.